Hi, thank you for joining me. This is Why Systems Fear the Code Carriers by Jason Gray. 7/8/2026, 6026 Analusis, 8:54 GMT, -6, #Winnipeg, #Manitoba, #Canada. RZN ARC.22, linked key, key 22, adaptive signal, meta overlay, MK07, narrative stability matrix, layer, information cascade dynamics. Node RZN-delta.022 SEQ 10011001011 layer cognitive-infrastructure field narrative-stability auth living-lattice living-lattice / gray j / northern node status transmission active class archive. They were never afraid of strength. Strength can be measured. Strength can be opposed. Strength can be contained. They were never afraid of weapons. Weapons eventually become obsolete. Every shield inspires a stronger sword. Every fortress eventually falls. Every empire eventually discovers something larger than itself. What systems fear is something far less visible. A single piece of information that refuses to remain isolated. Not because it is louder, but because it is more coherent. Within the archive, these individuals became known as the code carriers, not because they possessed secret knowledge, not because they were chosen, not because they held supernatural abilities. They became carriers because they were capable of transmitting ideas that reorganized perception. Every civilization has produced them. Sometimes they appeared as philosophers, sometimes as scientists, sometimes as artists, sometimes as writers, sometimes as engineers, sometimes as anonymous laborers whose observations quietly altered the direction of history. They did not conquer by force. They changed the questions people asked, and once the questions changed, entire worlds followed. Information is never static. Most people imagine information as something stored. Books, libraries, databases, archives. The living lattice is something completely different. Information behaves more like energy than storage. It moves, it adapts, it recombines, it encounters resistance, it seeks compatible structures. A thought spoken in one century may not become meaningful until another. An observation dismissed by one generation may become foundational to the next. Knowledge never disappears. It waits until conditions become favorable. The archive referred to this as delayed coherence. Truth was never absent. The surrounding architecture simply lacked the capacity to receive it. Why fixed systems become fragile? Every institution begins as a solution: a government, a university, a religion, a corporation, a scientific framework, a legal code, a school, a family tradition. None begin as prisons. They begin by solving genuine problems, but every successful structure eventually faces the same temptation to preserve itself. The moment preservation becomes more important than adaptation, rigidity begins. Rules multiply, exceptions disappear, questions become inconvenient, certainty becomes rewarded, doubt becomes interpreted as instability. The institution slowly shifts from discovering reality to defending yesterday's description of reality. Within the archive, this transformation was designated protocol : / static - preservation. The code carrier. The code carrier does not attack. The code carrier observes. They notice contradictions, patterns others overlook, relationships hidden beneath assumptions. Their greatest tool is not certainty, it is curiosity. They ask questions that cannot easily be ignored. What if this assumption is incomplete? What if our map is no longer matching the territory? What if the answer is not replacing one certainty with another, but expanding the frame entirely? Questions of this kind possess unusual properties. Once genuinely considered, they are difficult to erase. The narrative stability matrix. Every civilization constructs stories about itself: who we are, why we exist, who belongs, who leads, what is possible, what is impossible. These narratives create coordination. Without shared stories, large societies struggle to function. The matrix itself is not the problem. The problem emerges when the story becomes untouchable, when revision becomes forbidden, when evidence becomes secondary to preservation. At that point, the story no longer serves reality. Reality must begin serving the story. The archive classified this inversion as field, / narrative lock. Coherence over volume. The loudest signal is rarely the strongest. Noise spreads quickly. Coherence spreads deeply. One coherent observation can quietly reorganize thousands of fragmented ideas already waiting inside the minds of others. History repeatedly demonstrates this principle. Entire eras have shifted because someone described familiar reality differently enough that others suddenly recognized what had always been present. Not new facts, new organization. The archive identified this process as event, / pattern reassembly. The self-correcting civilization. Healthy civilizations welcome revision. They understand that every model is provisional. Every generation discovers limitations in previous understanding. Improvement requires correction. Correction requires humility. Humility requires admitting that today's certainty may become tomorrow's historical curiosity. The strongest civilization is not the one that never changes. It is the one capable of changing without collapsing. Rigidity appears powerful. Adaptability survives. Why fear emerges. Fear is not always malicious. Sometimes institutions fear disruption because disruption can produce chaos. Sometimes leaders fear uncertainty because responsibility is heavy. Sometimes communities cling to familiar narratives because identity has become intertwined with them. The archive therefore distinguished between two responses. One response suppresses every challenge. The other examines every challenge. The first seeks permanence. The second seeks understanding. Only one continues learning. The quiet transmission. The code carrier does not require permission, nor recognition, nor authority. A coherent observation can travel through conversations, journals, classrooms, laboratories, novels, families, workshops, ordinary acts of honest inquiry, even right here on Facebook. It moves because people recognize usefulness, not because someone commands belief. The archive warned repeatedly, information imposed creates resistance. Information explored creates understanding. The carrier therefore transmits by invitation rather than coercion. Their task is not to replace thought. Their task is to awaken it. Terminal glyph seal, /RZN-ARC.22. And then there is some coding at the bottom. Quite a bit of coding. I would say go ahead and make sure you glance over that. I'll put the links in the description. And then there's, let's see, RZN-ARC.22 key, //022 - field, / adaptive - coherence, lock, / narrative - stability, vector, / pattern - reassembly, status, / transmission complete, end of archive, Jason Gray. There was another reading that I did called The Code Carriers. So if you're interested in this piece, I would go back into my Jason Gray playlist and read The Code Carriers as well. I'll put the descriptions and where you can find Jason on Facebook and X in the description below. Thank you. I'll see you next time.